RJ Young. I am not on a stat mill. If this is your first time watching Adapt and Respond, thank you for joining us here. We talk football. We talk college football year round. If you're into that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video, and participate in the community by answering the question in the comments below. Do you believe, as I have asserted with our headline in this segment, that Ohio State has a new RB1 in what turned out to be a handling of the Ohio Bobcats? Game did not get started as well as you would like if you're a Buckeye fan, but as the game went on, the number one team in the country did what the number one team in the country is supposed to do. Was it as clinical an offensive performance against Ohio as it was against Grambling State? Absolutely not. But it's also two very different football teams, two very different divisions, and Ohio is a good football team that lost its starting quarterback in Parker Navarro just before halftime. Might have made this game just a little bit more closer, but that doesn't take away from the performance that you got from Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith, and Bo Jackson. Julian Sayin, who had his second straight 300-yard passing performance. We also saw the streak of not allowing a sack come to an end. One interception he probably wants back, and one goofy one that kind of looked like a sack. He ends up going 25-32 for 347 with the 3 TDs and the 2 INTs. Jeremiah Smith continues to just be that guy, man. I mean, when the game looked like it was getting just a little bit tight, Julian Sayin did what I think that you should do when you've got a Jeremiah Smith and they don't. You say, hey, Ford, can you go up and get this for me right quick? And he says, I got you, because that's exactly what happened. He ends up with 9 catches for 153 yards and a TD. Right behind him is wide receiver 1B in Carnell Tate, who Brian Hartline has compared to T. Higgins at Cincinnati, and I think more importantly at Clemson. He's just such a big, strong guy. 5 catches for 101 yards in the game. Both those guys had TDs. Jeremiah Smith also had a rushing TD at the end of the game, really showcasing what he is about. He is the fastest Ohio State wide receiver to get to 1,500 yards, which should not surprise anybody, especially after he put up 1,300 yards plus last year in their national championship winning season. Again, I think the defense is probably going to get a little less recognition than it deserves, but it was a great performance by Matt Patricia's defense for a second consecutive week. We're talking about, or I should say a third consecutive week, if you think about what they did to Texas. Not allowing more than 163 total yards from that Ohio offense, just 50 yards on the ground, sacked the quarterback 4 times, and has turned out to be the kind of defense that we expect to be the one that can play for the national championship in a week where we saw some moving and shaking, right? South Florida shows up, gets stomped out by Miami. Georgia Tech shows up and beats Clemson. Georgia needs overtime to beat Tennessee, but Tennessee feels like one of the 2, 3, 4 best teams in the SEC. Texas looks vulnerable, doesn't look as good as we thought they would be. Arch Manning looks broken. Meanwhile, the Scarlet and Gray continue to do what the Scarlet and Gray do, and that is continue to put playmakers on the field week after week, offensively, defensively. I was really impressed with Bo Jackson. This is a guy who came into the season, freshman, who's RB3 on the depth chart. You're expecting C.J. Donaldson to take the lead as the transfer from West Virginia. He is also the upperclassman in the room, James Peoples being a sophomore. But you were thinking perhaps James Peoples could be RB1 by the end of this, because the way that people are talking about James Peoples last year probably would have been much louder had it not been for this guy, Jeremiah Smith, because he was dynamic, catching the ball out of backfield, making explosive plays. That absolutely turns out to be Bo Jackson, though, who had 8 rushes for 98 yards last week against Grambling. And this week, 9 rushes for 109 yards. That's 12.1 yards per carry. And he's got sudden quickness like Travion Henderson had sudden quickness. When he gets the ball, it's at full speed. You love to see that kind of a tailback. I enjoy it when I get to see a guy who's got breakneck speed before he hits the hole, because I know that if he gets through that hole, you're just not going to catch him. Adrian Peterson had that kind of speed. A lesser-known guy by the name of Alan Patrick had that kind of speed. When you see it, you know what it is, right? Quinshon Judkins, much more of a power back who was fast, but when you got to see Travion Henderson with the rock, you knew, especially in 2021 when he first broke out, there was just no catching that guy if you get him in open space. And Texas got a dose of that last year on the way to the national championship. And I think that's really cool for Brian Hartline to know going into this thing that he's got sorted what he expects from his playmaker. Julian Sayin has been unflappable back there. He's made a couple of bad decisions, but they're the kind of decisions that you expect a first-time starter to make or first-year starter to make, and he's not making them over and over again. He's really doing a good job of looking after the football, of going through his progressions, of seeing it before he throws it. Every now and again, he gets tricked. I think the more he sees on film of himself and the self-scouting he's going to be able to do with Billy Fessler, with Brian Hartline, the better he's going to be in the long term. One of the things that I also was watching for was how this offensive line started to block for the running backs and whether or not it changed based on who was back there. And what I think is Bo Jackson is making it easy for the offensive linemen to do their jobs. Whereas a CJ Donaldson might be trying to stretch it to look for a hole, or James Peoples might not just get there at the right time. This time is a little bit off. Bo Jackson seems to have seen it and get right on somebody's back hip, right into the second level, and then do what running backs are supposed to do, which is make a guy miss or run them over. That's why you give a guy the ball at tailback. The blocking scheme is going to do its job. It's going to get you to the hole. It's going to get you to the linebacker. It's up to you to make that guy miss or to run him over. It's your choice as long as you get it done and you get those yards after contact. You get those yards past the line of scrimmage. And when you're averaging better than 10 yards per carry over the last 2 games, it's difficult for me to say with a straight face anybody else should be getting the ball. Again, just 17 touches. The dude has 98 plus 109, my crappy math, 207 yards on 17 touches. Keep feeding that dude the rock. He's got a long of 64 in this game against Ohio. And don't kid yourself about Ohio. It's a good football team, all right? They beat West Virginia last week, the same West Virginia that beat Pitt this week. It's going to be there at the end like it was last year. Different head coach, obviously, but Ohio won the MAC last year because they were that good. They have a proud football tradition, too. They wanted this game. I'm sure a lot of those guys look at Ohio State as a place where they should have been recruited and they wanted to play. And you usually should play with a little bit of pride, especially when you're playing at night and you're playing on what is essentially pay-per-view television, as this game was on Peacock with the Notre Dame game and Texas A&M game being on NBC. I pay for all those services so I can watch any of the football games that are on the 20 different networks because that's my job. Quite literally is to watch as much football as there is so that I can rank the top 25 teams in the country. So when I see these tweets or these texts about how many different channels you got to have to watch football, I'm going, some of y'all want to be about college football. Some of y'all don't. I want to be about college football, which means that you need to pay attention to the nuances that are happening in and around the best teams in the sport and then some, right? Like we don't know what we're going to do with South Carolina, who was trailing to Vanderbilt last I looked with Lenore Sellers being out. See how far Clemson's going to drop out. I don't think that Clemson's a top 25 team anymore. See what we're going to do with LSU as DJ Lagway had thrown a 3rd interception through the 3rd quarter. But if you are Ohio State and you're an Ohio State fan, this is more the same. You expect it to look this way, but it is nice to know that you're correct in what you're seeing.